We see a lot more happening in terms of NFC, proximity payments. And the second thing that's, I think, will accelerate this trend in the future is a new technology. It's called host card emulation. Traditionally, you always had the telcos on board because they were providing the SIM card, which hosts the secure element which you need for the NFC transaction. Now, with cloud, there's a new way of doing things. It's called host card emulation. And basically, you don't store the secure element on the phone anymore, not on a SIM card anymore. You store it in the cloud. Visa, Master say, hey, we accept it, it's safe. And now first banks are testing it. It's still happening in Australia. So Credit Union Australia just launched the first HCE commercial rollout, I think, in the world even. And there are a lot of trials going on. I think Westpac is trialing it in New Zealand. So this is really just happening now. Problem with it, it's not working offline. So you need to have a data connection because to secure it, you need tokenization. But tokenization is the same thing that Apple uses, for instance, to authorize their transactions. So it's basically not using a card number, a real card number, but you use a token. Well, that is as good, serving as a card number, but you don't share your credentials with somebody. New technology is really entering that, stepping up security in one go, making it easier to deploy. And that's the thing about host card emulation. So far for the banks, it wasn't really super exciting to go into NFC payments because they had to partner with the telco and they had to use a third party, a trusted service manager, who was also charging fees, who's doing the update so that the payment information are updated to the SIM card. So too many cooks in the kitchen, your pie or what you get out of it gets very, very small, and therefore nobody was really going into it except for very large players, and nobody could really crack that thing. Now I believe actually we are set for growth in proximity payments. Remote payments, I think, is a lot more happening. Talking here really peer-to-peer payments, paying for online commerce, really using the mobile phone. And there you also see a lot more activity by non-bank players because it's, I mean, PayPal sits somewhere, I can still use it over here, I just need to have a PayPal account, I can use it. So a lot more application for e-commerce here, also because it's more detached from the physical world, so you're not limited by borders for it. I think it will finally take off. The problem with NFC is that it is a really complex infrastructure behind it. Because of the many players that you have, because you need to have the terminals in place, you cannot just use your existing card terminals. And you have various different standards, so you cannot just, for instance, here in Singapore we have Nets, and then we have the Visa Flash Pay and then Master PayWave. So those two are compatible with each other, but you cannot use your Nets PayWave to pay at the MasterCard or Visa terminal. So now even one merchant has to have multiple terminals in order to accept different contactless payments. So that it's getting as difficult and complicated to put NFC infrastructure in place. The good thing is NFC is, I mean, it will probably increasingly move towards Visa and MasterCard. It will be like credit card payments. So they will be the payment system that will, through which most of the transactions will go eventually, or are already. But it gets more difficult than that because you have the telcos in place, so banks have to partner with the telcos. Then you need to have those third parties, that trusted service managers, so Gemalto here in Singapore, for instance. So it really is such a complex ecosystem, and no matter how you do it, whether, I mean, in Singapore, for instance, a regulator, the IDA, was sponsoring that, was setting out clear guidelines, okay, this is how we want it, and that pushed the entire infrastructure and was already It was all there. Even phones were growing in the market, but consumers didn't care because it didn't have any value add over the Visa FlashPay card that you were just tapping, or your EasyLink card that you use for public transport. So there was no value add in it. So it's really so many reasons that have held back NFC. I mean, now the interesting thing we're all waiting for actually is to see what happens with Apple Pay. Because Apple Pay injected itself in this ecosystem, so they're actually taking on the role of a TSM, of what is Jamal doing here in Singapore. They provide a secure element on the iPhone, and they force, for instance, the bank, or they impose very, very difficult, hard conditions on the banks. So a lot of the money that originally was split between the payment networks and the banks, merchant discount fees. Now Apple interjected itself in this process and is charging fees. So the pie gets smaller for the banks. I mean, they're happy to take that as long as volumes grow. Because then, I mean, even if you make a little bit less, but you have more volumes, you're still making money, or you make more money. But now, if Apple Pay doesn't pay off, I think very, very soon we see banks dropping out of it again. Also because Apple is forcing them to, I think, 95% of their credit cards, every bank that becomes a member of Apple Pay has to guarantee that they allow 95% of their credit cards onto Apple Pay. So basically, Apple tells them, you give me, if I don't get those 95% of your transactions and I make money with those, you cannot be a member.